This is when you meet each other on the email, and now you meet one another here at the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, I would just like to briefly introduce you to my panel of discussants. First here on my left-hand side, it's my left, it's your right, huh? Okay, it's Mr. Lawrence Barley of Sinaco. It's also Dr. Eliada Nwuso Griffin LL. L, sorry. That's fine. I'll just start continuing. Okay, and she is from UCT, from the Bertha Foundation. Also, Mr. Ludwig Ehart. He is of the DGRB, a very prominent cooperative organization promoting cooperatives in South Africa. And there, right at the end, is Mr. Flavio Bassi. He is the director of Ashoka Southern Africa. So welcome to my discussants. And I'm now going to just give a brief presentation. What I'm going to do is to absolutely, in 10 or 15 minutes, just try to give you an overview of the state of the social economy, not the state of the nation. that was somehow somebody got it wrong. But it's the state of the social economy in South Africa, what it looks like. And right, the relevant studies here are the one I did in 2010, the exploratory study into factors influencing and enabling environment for social enterprises in South Africa. This was commissioned by the International Labour Office, and it was published in 2010. Then also a study that I did in 2011. It's a national case study for the Republic of South Africa, the need for state civil society dialogue to develop public policies for the social and solidarity economy. Now, you will find that I will often mention the solidarity economy. It is just another way of saying the social economy. In your Francophone Africa and in your French-speaking countries, the use of solidarity economy is more common than social economy. And the theme was work and employment, and it was the forum. It was a French word. I'm not going to even try to pronounce it. The short form is fees. Okay, so while the fee study focused more on policy implementation, both of the research papers deals extensively with the state of the social economy. Something fell here. Can you just, I just don't hope it's something, okay, it's dealing with the social economy. And what you can do is to download these from the UJ website. It will be available within 2 days with all the presentations and conference papers. So you are very welcome to download it at the HTTP, the UJ website. There will be a link to these papers later on. So if we look at descriptors of the sector, the social economy, and they refer to the social, the fees, the terms of reference there, refer to the social economy as being the social and solidarity economy as being made up, and this is beautiful, of collective approaches to sustainable development that contribute to a world that is more fair and just. And I think we all are working to a world that is more fair and just and where more people are employed. So at the conference of the social economy, Africa's response to the global crisis, also arranged by the ILO in 2009 in October, the social economy was defined as, the social economy is a concept designating enterprises and organizations, in particular cooperative mutual benefit societies, associations, foundations, and social enterprises, which have the specific feature of producing goods, services, knowledge, while pursuing both economic and social aims and fostering solidarity. So this is also referred to in other countries as the third sector. Now, according to a recent study by Johns Hopkins University, the Netherlands has the largest third sector of 20 countries across Europe. In Ireland, the non-profit sector accounts for 8.8% of GDP. This is huge. This is not a small sector, it's a significant sector. In Sweden, the non-profit sector is attributed with fostering a nationwide social change towards progressive economic, social and cultural policies. While in Italy, the third sector is increasingly viewed, and I spoke to that, about that earlier, increasingly viewed as a primary employment source for the entire country. So, why aren't we there? So what is the state of the social economy in South Africa? Now, one of the first findings of this was to consider a focal point in the Office of the Presidency to assist with the streamlining of social economy organizations. I refer to that as SEO, so if I use that abbreviation, just know that I'm referring to the social economy organizations, would be your cooperatives, not only social enterprising non-profits too, or emerging social enterprises, and with the development of entities. And this should be similar to your Office of the Third Sector in the UK, where all activities within the sector is being streamlined. At the moment, we have a bit of over-regulation. Would you agree with that? Yeah, we do agree with that, and we need to discuss this at length. We need to have those courageous conversations. So over-regulation and compliance with different departments. We have DTI, we've got social development, we've got SARS, and even you've got local government involved. So dealing with multiple organizations and also local government, we need to streamline this. It is as if there are so many activities aimed at the social economy, but there's no coherence, there's no streamlining, and there's a real need for that to happen. While preferential procurement, and Sibisile of the ILO actually referred to that in the question time, is embedded for SEOs in the BBBEE codes and in the legal framework, access to government contracts remain elusive. And this is very real. This may be an unrelated issue. There can be other issues playing in here, but the issue of successful bidding for government quotes and tenders and the social economy organizations' relationships with marketing and presentation needs to be explored further. So it's not just about getting the social economy to tender and to get them profitable. It's also about training them how to do it. So we actually need a lot of training in the sector. Business development services providers focus on SMEs. Now, I told somebody earlier this morning, they refer to the social sector as the projects. And this is very unfortunate because the focus is not on social economy organization, and this is one of the crucial problems we are facing, is that we are not recognized as a sector. We are projects. We're not businesses also. We're not organizations that do good and need to make a living. So BDS, or Business Development Services, is non-existent in our rural areas, and this is a reason for concern. The non-profit and the total SEO sector is led by and managed by black women, in contrast to the private sector. So here we have the upper hand. We are a sector that's inclusive. According to Swilling and Russell, found that 59% of managerial positions, and that is in 2005, were taken up by women, and that 73% of these women were black. 60% of all full-time employees were women, and 81% of these employees were black. So this is the findings of the non-profit sector, which is also within the social economy. It's very reflective of what is really happening, and it's evident that the social and solidarity economy is inclusive of previously advantaged groups. Now this is where we make the real difference. But can you see our frustration that we are projects and not real? We are real. So people with disabilities or sheltered employment, let me just see, are included. There are facilities and grants available. And the Department of Social Development have protected workshops and it enables people with disabilities to earn a living and be part of the economy. But again, the social economy absorbs people with disabilities, but it is not as evident within the private sector, where you don't have the same commitment to be inclusive as in the social economy. We have 180 protective workshops and 346 rehabilitation facilities available in South Africa, and this was 2 years ago. The figure is probably more at this time. So cooperatives have a tremendous potential for job creation. I think all of us know this. The fact is evident from international literature and studies, but despite government's deep commitment, cooperatives are failing at an unprecedented level. So let us have a look at cooperatives. And we are looking at large numbers, but in 2011, when I did the study for fees, the figure was that the mortality rate is 88%. And it's estimated to be higher now. This is a tragedy, and I would love to hear Sanako's response, and also later tomorrow we will further talk about cooperatives and new legislation. But in the same government gazette notice, the low survival rate is attributed to a lot of factors. That there is no dedicated agency designated primarily to support cooperatives on a focused basis. So there's untargeted and uncoordinated support. I think we are all aware of that, characterized sometimes by poor mentorship, a sense of neglect, and this comes from a DTI document. There's a sense of neglect among all spheres of government and their respective enterprise development agencies. On the other hand, cooperatives themselves have not been formed on a genuine basis too. A lot of them. They tend to be established for the purpose of accessing the incentive scheme instead of genuinely building the cooperative movement. So you do have that there is a lot of factors playing into. There's no one single factor that we can say this is the reason why cooperatives are failing at this unprecedented rate. There's ongoing conflict among cooperative members over issues of money and the use of ownership and assets. This is a very real problem. And when working with cooperatives, one often have to have a component dealing with conflict management. Very important. Poor management, a lack of cooperation is a problem. But where indigenous languages were used in the documents, we found that there was a much higher success rate. The failure rate was much less. So we need to look at how do we train, how do we educate, how do we bring the message across? Are we doing the right thing, or are we just trying to do things right? So the use of indigenous languages are very important here. Collective management is problematic. Members are unskilled and unemployed, and this has been pointed out by Phillips in 2003. The governance is an issue, and governance is, by the way, one of the crucial issues. If one looks at sustainability, I've done another study on another aspect of sustainability and found that governance is absolutely crucial, and it's the foundation of sustainability. So if we look at governance, and there's also a poor understanding with the cooperatives of the laws. The perception is also that cooperatives, to be a member of a cooperative is not cool. It's reserved for gogos. No, that is the perception. Unfortunately, we need to make it cool. We need to have the cooperative movement to jack it up and rid it from these labels that's being attached to it. Training in management and leadership skills are absolutely essential. That was also one of the findings of the ILO. Lack of knowledge of the cooperative concept by officials are also a problem. So, and then we have no capacity. Now, if you look at a country, and it's been mentioned how African countries, how wonderful some of them are, If you look at Kenya, they have 4,000 foot soldiers just working with cooperatives. When I did the study, there was about 30, 40 people at DTI working with that. It's a huge, huge difference. So we need to put foot soldiers on the ground to make cooperatives a success. That will bring the jobs that we all want to see. And training and ongoing mentoring and coaching is essential. We cannot just expect, and you know, you just got a mentoring and coaching association. We cannot expect our cooperatives to just know everything. They need mentoring, they need coaching, they need people in this audience can actually be part of that. And I would invite you, if you want to be a mentor or coach, to actually just, my colleague, our stakeholder coordinator, Adelaide Sheikh, just to contact her and to express your willingness, because we need that. So this is the state of cooperatives. If we look at the social stock exchange, we have a totally different picture. The South African Stock Exchange, and I'm taking these figures from 2011, Tamsin, so I think it might have changed, but the South African Social Investment Exchange, SASX, was launched in 2006 by Greater Capital. Since its inception, SASX has raised 14.65 million for 73 projects designated to benefit a total of almost 80,000 individuals. We are one of the first countries in the world to have a social stock exchange. So if you don't know that, now you have a new piece of information. It's one of the world's first social investment stock exchanges and provides an internet platform tailored to facilitate social investment by individuals and small, medium-sized enterprises. By identifying and selecting projects, providing monitoring and evaluation, and releasing progress reports, SASX provides the service which investors are unable to conduct themselves. And then we look at enterprising non-profits or social enterprises. Now, this is also sometimes contentious. There are differences in opinion. And these are sometimes ideological, and sometimes it is from an investment point of view. But in Canada, they don't refer to social enterprises. They talk about enterprising non-profits. If we look at the landscape at the moment, we want to promote social enterprises, but we have a large number of enterprising non-profits. They're trying to make a living, and our focus should also be there. We cannot focus on social enterprises alone. We will be neglecting a large population of South Africa and of the need on the ground. We work specifically with enterprising or emerging, we call them emerging social enterprises. They need to have more money. They don't get the grants. They don't get the tenders. They need to get more money, and we need to change the landscape for them through education and training. So there's a large number of non-profits can be described as emerging social enterprises. Again, in the study by Swilling and Russell, editor Adam Habib, he's now the Vice Chancellor of Wits University, in his introduction contends that the comparative dimension of the study demonstrates that South Africa's civil society is as large in proportional terms and as vibrant as in all but a handful of advanced industrialized countries. Is this a surprise to you? Yeah, it is. We are advanced. We have a huge civil society movement. The country's non-profit workforce and the proportion that is volunteer labor are well above the international average. Public sector support for civil society is also well beyond the international average. So this is a very significant finding is that the size and the scope of the non-profit sector in South Africa is huge, but the number of organizations registered in terms of the Non-Profit Organization Act, or the Act, has decreased dramatically over the last few months. According to the Department of Social Development, over 85,000 NPOs were registered in terms of the Act at the end of March 2012. During January 2013, the number has decreased just over 29,000. That was the huge shock about the deregistration of a very large number, more than half of the non-profits. And one could ask, because in the study in 2005 of Swilling and Russell, the findings were, and it is still like that today, that the informal non-profit sector is enormously big. It is almost as big as those registered. Now, can you imagine that this could just lead to an increase in the informal non-profit sector, where it's not formalized? So currently, there are efforts by the National Development Agency to assist the deregistered non-profits to become compliant. So they are set out to change it around and to make them compliant, because governance is a foundation to sustainability. South Africa's trade unions have embraced social enterprises, as illustrated by the Job Creations Trust. I'm very happy to see Shamila Ghani here, and it is owned by the 3 union federations, namely COSATU, FEDUSA, and NACTU. The Job Creation Trust wholly owns the social enterprise Creative Designs, and other initiatives by this body can also be regarded as flourishing social enterprises. Very interesting, in this case, the Job Creation Trust, employment maximization is one of the key factors. Not maximization of profits, but of employment. So it's engaged in advocacy for government to protect the local textile clothing. There are many instances where social enterprises influence policy, and Ashoka claims that 87% of their fellows influence policy in some way or another. This is really significant if we think of the influence of social entrepreneurs and of the sector on policy. So there is, and you know, in my opinion, there is we do have access to government, but we don't speak with one voice. So there is a tendency to interchangeably use the word, and this is also one of the findings, social entrepreneurship and social enterprise in South Africa, and there is no existing legislation or provision for social enterprises in South Africa, and in particularly allowing for equity for upscaling purposes. This is a huge frustration where you have a non-profit, they need to upscale, they can't get hold of money. So that is a huge problem because the law doesn't allow that. But it's overcome through hybrids, non-profits, a non-profit and a for-profit combination. I think that Pat Pillay who was here this morning, he's a perfect example. He's got a non-profit. He has a PTY Limited, which is a PTY Limited, and a trust. And these are hybrids that he used to fulfill his social purpose, because on one level he needs to get money on the market, but he also needs to be a non-profit. So you often find that there are hybrids and that the one pays the other one. Okay, I'm quickly going to finish. There are various ways that in which provision can be made for social enterprises. We can amend the NPO Act, a fiscal solution by amending the Income Tax Act, and SAR said absolutely no. Why should somebody sell fish and chips on this corner and a businessman on that corner? He pays tax and you will not pay tax, and that cannot it cannot be done. You will put him out of business. So you will need to pay tax. So that is why there is a cap on the trading as long as social enterprises are not trading in competition with the private sector or your non-profits on trading. That is a very difficult one. And SARS is very adamant on that. And I met Minister Pravin Gordhan at the time when he was still Minister of Finance at the World Economic Forum in Dar es Salaam. And he says, just don't tell me you want money. You must tell me how can we make money. A very difficult situation. Tamsin, I'm going to leave it to you to talk about that later on. If we look at the research, I just want to show you here, the equity sharing for social enterprises will facilitate capacity building and scaling up. And these were the outcomes of the survey that I've done at that time. 17% strongly agree, 51 agree, strongly disagree and don't know. So you can see that there is the majority of people would like to see equity sharing as an option for social enterprises to have access to money. There is no data available, and I want to go quickly for this. There's no data available on business development services providers. Unfortunately, we don't know if they are successful. What we do know is that jobless people actually go from one BDS provider to the other and do some courses and so on, and we wonder if that is sustainable. The 7 most needed BDS services, the business development services, identified by the social economy organizations and those working with social economy organizations, differ drastically from what the BDS providers themselves and government perceive to be the most needed services. So there is some way that we are not communicating. This is one of the findings of one of my studies. There is an urgent need for a database. We don't have that. Categorizing and indexing everybody in the social entrepreneurial and social enterprising space. Such a database should preferably be the priority of the focal point in the office of the presidency or another organization or network. Mapping the role players in the social enterprise development in South Africa or in this developmental space is of utmost importance. And what happens is everybody's got a few clients or a database, and they wouldn't like to share it with others. This is wrong. We need to start sharing our information if we want this sector to be successful. There is also the issue of what is a grant and what is a donation and what is money in advance for services. That would determine whether somebody would be a social enterprise or a non-profit. It is, in a way, a little bit, I don't want to use that word, but for me it is a little bit ridiculous because your person that will give you a grant will expect services you have to perform, you have to monitor, you have to evaluate. You need to work for it. There's no ways that it will just pour in and you can do what you want. So in a way, every grant has attached to it a performance, a performance indicator. You need to perform to actually do something. So, but that is also a point of debate. So networks for non-profits or social organizations are fragmented. And this is a very serious point. I think we need to address this at this conference. Networks are fragmented. Since there was the collapse of Sangoko, if you know that many years ago, Sangoko used to take care of the whole country. And after 1994, Sangoko collapsed. And everybody went to Parliament that was involved in the sector. So there is a collapse and there's still a bit of a vacuum. The South African Social Entrepreneurial Network, or ASEN, initially showed a lot of potential, especially here in Gauteng, but its main activity is now in Cape Town, and the movement is supported, I think, by the Bertha Foundation. It's, you can talk about that, Iliada. The NESASA Act as the umbrella body for stokvels in South Africa. And SANACU has provincial and municipal structures throughout the country, recognized by government and also launched in 2009. So while the social and solidarity economy as a whole is not yet organized to enter into dialogue with government, we don't have an umbrella body. We have bodies that sectors are recognized, but we don't have an umbrella body. The different groups within does have access to government. It doesn't mean we don't have access to government. I think government listens to us. It is essential that a movement representing the social and solidarity economy be formed to assist government. Policies. Many policies pertain to a more inclusive economy and specifically to the social economy. These policies are excellent. For example, government has excellent policies, for instance, for people with disabilities. And Dube in 2005 in his executive summary said, the role and effectiveness of disability legislation in South Africa also feels that the factors contributing to the poor implementation of legislation and policies are that the definition and nature of disabled people's participation have not been adequately reviewed and articulated, and that the policy requirements for disability mainstreaming are not adequately linked to performance management, thereby undermining commitment to implementation. Isn't the fact that a lot of these policies not being linked to performance management leads to poor implementation? So there are difficulties with policy implementation, not only with people with disabilities, but all over. According to the new growth path, the main changes for the social economy will be comprehensive government support for the social economy. Now listen to this. Initiatives based on changes in markets, institutions and service delivery systems, combined with targeted support for skills development, infrastructure provision and incentives. However, government's focus is perceived to favor the SMEs in the private sector rather than the social economy organizations. So policy implementation is now seen as a major obstacle. We often find that the policies are there, but on the implementation level, something goes wrong, whether it's the bargaining councils, whether it's anywhere not understanding the social economy, it is not happening. So we need the policy implementation level seen as a major obstacle, someone to champion a cause. And if you don't have a champion for a cause, whether it's people with disabilities or whether it is upliftment of or poverty alleviation, if we don't have a champion, the government's good intent are sometimes lost. So I'm going to give it over to the discussants at the moment. And I wonder if you can just start with Eliada. I said that you should start with the networking, and then you can arrange among yourselves how you would like to discuss this. Paper.
Great, thank you, Susan. They said ladies first, so I blush as I begin. Greetings to all of you. Indeed, a good morning as we're ushering into a good afternoon. Very, very happy to be here, and thank you, Susan, so much for the invitation. This is really exciting. This is really exciting. I arrived in South Africa in 2010 as a new member of the academic faculty at the Graduate School of Business, University of Cape Town, and I walked into what appeared to be just a flurry of activity around social entrepreneurship, around entrepreneurial and business approaches to social change, and my eyes were stunned because it resonated so much with what I would want to do with not only my academic work, but with my life. So I'm very happy to be joining you all. I bring you greetings from the University of Cape Town's Graduate School of Business, most specifically the Bertha Center for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship. So we are the Bertha Center, where I work with my colleague, many of you know him, Francois Bonici, who's the director there. I'm the senior lecturer there, and we have our colleague here, Lisa Krotman, from the Bertha Foundation, that supports activists and social change activity all throughout the world, social entrepreneurship being one expression of that. And so indeed, we greet you all from the Western Cape. Let's see, where do we start to bite into this beast? Well, I want to start by actually offering an appreciation to our lovely MC, who is now no longer here. But I want to tell her thank you for breaking down that idea of social, because it is very pivotal. It has a very, sorry guys, it has a very critical role in distinguishing that which we speak of when we say social economy, when we say social enterprise. And she railed it out beautifully. That is collaborative, it's collective, it is human-based, and it's relational. It's relational. That the idea of the social economy is that it thrives, the idea, the innovation that stirs within it, the innovation that it generates is facilitated by relationship, by connectedness, by exchange, by engagement and interaction, by trust and appreciation, even welcomed conflict between the actors, be they individuals or organizations within the economy. So that is a very, very critical distinguishing factor. Because if we are emphasizing that the social economy is social by nature, then it's worth emphasizing that the social does not only qualify the impact that we want to create at the end, or the intent that is motivating us from the beginning, but that aspect of social qualifies the process by which we innovate, period. We innovate through our engagement with each other. We innovate through not only the idea of networking, but how the networks we create, the relationships we create are active and they're thriving and they're synergistic. Our innovation is socially facilitated. Hence then, the impact and the importance of the network. And not necessarily a network as an entity in itself, but the activity of networking. And when I say networking, I don't really mean the exchange of business cards, you know, hey, I see you across the room, you know, I'm gonna make sure I connect with you, and then the tea afterward or the coffee. Not necessarily, but the process, the activity of relationship building. And so I compel us to kind of undergo kind of an out-of-body experience right now. Of course, each of us here, we represent a organization, we represent a enterprise, we may represent an association or a public agency, and so we know the nature of work that we do within our respective entities. But if you were to leave your skin of your role that's affiliated with whatever organization you're with, and if you were to hover above the entire social entrepreneurial landscape, above the entire social economy. And if you were to consider the different actors, be they the organizations or entities you work with, policymakers, emergent enterprises, if you were to consider all of the actors within this landscape, how well would you say we are networked to each other? How strong, how vibrant would you say our relating to each other is? How often, how frequently do we exchange, do we cooperate, do we even convene or exchange or just build ideas casually outside of convening spaces like this? How networked is the social economy? And so Susan mentioned social economy organizations. But what I want to offer are actually just a few, maybe more theoretical or conceptual ideas or ways of thinking of social economic organizing. How is our social economy organized? How is it engaging with each other? Not that we're just entities that constitute a network, but how active is our relationship with each other? And then what is the fruit that comes out of that synergistic engaging that we are undergoing? that makes the social economy a conducive, fruitful place for social change work like social entrepreneurship, like cooperatives, to really take off and be sustainable. So 3 general ideas, 3 general thoughts around how our social economy is networked, how it's connected within itself. And I throw these out as points of consideration, hoping that they provoke some more questions, and even more so, more creative ways of thinking about the layout of our social economy. And that it will feed throughout our discussions today and then into tomorrow. And these concepts, these ideas are coming from research that I've done and are doing with social entrepreneurs, particularly within the Western Cape, through networks like ASEN, so on and so forth. So the one point, very quickly. The question I ask is, what exactly is the driver? What is the driver? What are the driving relationships of our social economy? When we think of the connections that are taking place between entities and actors, what drives those connections? One thing I've observed in the research that I'm doing thus far is that you have the economy, and when we think of economy, many times we think of the free market economy that, of course, has its engagement with the state and with the political sector, but we think of the free market economy, and in that regard, the economy is usually based within a market institution, within that institution of transaction, of services and goods that are mediated by a customer's willingness to pay and a provider's costing of how much they're offering the service. I think we all know the basic economics 101. One thing I'm noticing, though, is that with the social economy, and particularly my work is a lot around emergent social enterprises, is that their work, their organizational operates not only in the market space, but their work also operates in the movement space. And so within the market space, yes, they have identified economic opportunities, and now they are seeking relationships by which to source either information or access or refine a certain competitive advantage by which then now to maximize and optimize the work that they're doing. That's one level of relationships. But then that, for social entrepreneurs, seems to be embedded in a larger domain of the movement, where not only are they looking for relationships for economic viability's sake, but they're looking for relationships with entities that are resonating, pulsating with the same conviction. Thank you. The same conviction, the same philosophy about the advancement of natural and human life, that care about the lives of people. And so then you see their relationships evolve in that arena as well. And so then great opportunities emerge from those relationships. So as a result, my first question coming out of this arena is, how is the social economy, how are we negotiating the presence of our market-oriented relationships with our movement-oriented relationships? Are there places where those sets of relationships contradict within our social economy? And how can policy then address or reconcile that? The second quick point is that if we look at a network in a structured way, every entity has a position within that network, and depending upon where you're positioned, renders you certain type of access, sometimes certain types of power, sometimes certain types of influence. You could be the entity that, in network theory, they call network positions centralities. You could be the network that has a very high degree centrality, where you're the individual that everybody is always engaging with. You're the individual, you're the organization that has constant engagement with multiple actors in the social economy. Or you can be an actor with a high betweenness centrality, where you may not engage with as many actors, but you are the go-to person when it comes to engaging with another clique or another sub-network of entities. Or thirdly, you could be an entity with a high closeness centrality, where again, you may not be the actor that has the multiple relationships, but when it comes to connecting with other key actors, you're able to engage with them in the shortest amount of time. You have their number in your cell phone. You can quickly get in contact with Minister Trevor Manuel or with Pat Pile, just like that, because you have such a close relatedness to them. I compel you to ask yourselves, as the actors of the social economy, where you're positioned in that network. And as you're still looking at the network as a whole, how are other entities, including government, including large corporations, banks, how are they positioned? What is their position within that network? Because the question I then ask is, how can we best leverage the positions that we hold in order to add more life and more engagement to the social economy, in order to connect and create with each other more. It may be that we've considered government for the longest time to be that center actor that everyone hovers around, but maybe that is not all of government's role. Maybe government plays, from the research I've engaged with thus far, I've noticed that government plays a great role in connecting social entrepreneurs to larger communities and populations. It enables social entrepreneurs, either through procurement basis or what have you, to be able to scale out their operations and access more and more communities. Perhaps we should reconsider that. And the very last point is that you're seeing a lot within the research of network structure, attention given to clusters, given to the idea that so much energy and exchange could take place when social entrepreneurs work together. And so, or not even work together, but when they're around each other, it's as if they inspire each other and then more happens. So what is the policy implications for those spaces to be created within our economy? Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Susan. Of course, I will not follow the protocol because time is it's gone. We just have to do a few minutes.
We need to give 10 minutes for this.
Oh, no, thanks. No.
For everybody. So we need to really divide our time.
No, thanks very much. But of course, Mkomana Wumfamadi, DRV, ILO, Sanako, and all cooperatives and other stakeholders, very important people here, and then all of us. We'd just like to share with you how cooperatives are operating in this country. We, as an apex, that represent all cooperatives in the country as Sanako. You raise other critical issues about the failure of the cooperatives or the thinking of how cooperatives operate. Some of the issues that you've indicated are true in terms of lack of the training and also people not following the process, what is a cooperative and how cooperative works, and the ideology per se of why people reach cooperatives in terms of incentives and so on. And that's a wrong ideology because cooperatives are based on the principles, values, ethics, and corporate governance. They need to comply with the law. And of course, we're working with various institutions in the country and out of the country. Of course, the ILO, they're here, the DRV are here. We've been in these offices throughout in Turin, as well in Germany, trying to see how international perspective cooperatives are operating. But I must share with you that cooperatives, for them to work and prove the world that they can do, they need support, they need market, they need opportunities, and procurement. Because they can produce whatever they do, but if there's no market, then they're sidelined from the mainstream of the economy. I would like to share with you the other critical issues, that this government has very good policies, but officials, you know, like that the politicians and then the heads of the governments will pronounce, but the implementers of the people who must support cooperatives, they drag their legs. And then also the ideology of that we need to work to fight I don't know what to call it, it's an epidemic of the corruption. It's not all, it's not everyone, but those are the individualistic. But that we don't need to keep quiet. I mean, as a movement, we need to stand up and raise and expose these tendencies about the individuals and make sure that they are moved on the way. I'd like to share with you that you spoke about the issue of one voice. I must tell you categorically that the Department of Trade and Industry has initiated, together with cooperatives themselves, to say cooperatives need to speak in one voice, and they need to make sure they're organized from the local, the district, the province, national, as well as the whole world. And that was done. But the mentality of our people, or of us, is not to wait sort of, maybe there are these people who are doing these things, how best do we influence, than to fight when you're outside, instead of raising issues within, inside. And at an engagement level, and together we say, no, let's change this process. Because when you're outside, it means that other people sideline other people, and which is a danger. I would also like to announce certain issues that I think the president of the country has signed the bill that is going to be an act, and that speaks about the agencies that support cooperatives, as well as one apex, one cooperatives. In that note, I want to share with you that in South Africa, we've got one organization, that is SANACO, that represents all cooperatives. And this body is a member, it engages government and other private sectors in NEDLEC, even the bill that comes from there. We are also representing cooperatives. I'm speaking here as well as the president of the SADC Cooperative Federation. We had the conference here, as well as the IC Africa and the General Assembly. And on that note, let me share with you that we'll have major events this year. That since 1895, the ICA, International Cooperative Alliance, has never came to Africa. Because SANACO is a member, we've managed to grab them. They're coming to Africa, in South Africa, in Cape Town this year. And that's why you can see the muscle and the power of how organized we are. And that is the space what they're doing. In that space again, we'll be also hosting the Cooperative BRICS Leaders Summit in October. We'll also take to Cape Town do it because they're next to each other so that people can be able to not to travel long distance. And in all these things, we don't want to isolate any cooperatives that have been at other levels. I want to assure if there are other cooperatives here from other institutions or formed at the level who are playing at the space of the tertiary or secondary, that I'm inviting them and they must contact me. If they need my contact, I think we'll leave them here. That we don't have to sideline anyone. As we're going to the Apex, we are inviting all of them to go and have one Apex. That is a real geographical representation of all cooperatives. And if the issues don't move out, engage with it. But I want to share with you, madam, that the social economy, it's about putting the people first, not profit. And this country, we find there's a gap, and that is continuing to open, because individuals are prioritized to be given the opportunity to procure, and instead of giving these cooperatives. The ideology that we have missed when it started, we've missed the opportunity when they started BBBEE. Because a broad-based black economic movement is for cooperatives because there are more, they are broad-based, they have the majority. It's not for individuals. That you find today, individuals, they've got more empowerment, exploiting other people. And we need to fight, as cooperatives. And this is our level, and at our level. I would also urge, as we're going to engage, let's speak in one voice in the interest of cooperatives to grow. I would like to conclude by saying, we need also to recognize stock fair, and I will speak in Venda. There are people who have got stock fairs. There are people who have got Zugombera, who's going to dance. There are people who have got Zukona, Mihodisan. These issues, just to share with you, they play a very critical role in the economy because they recognize that people, no one can serve because the poor people cannot be isolated in the space. So in that social economy, we want to stress that cooperative is a way, and we've done it, and we'll do that. And indeed, as I conclude, because of time, we are ready as SANACO to sign the declaration on behalf of all cooperatives in the country. But not only to engage government, but private sectors as well. We've got mines, we've got these people have got in the tourism and others and Sasol, as well as others, to make sure that let's be part of these things. And from the president's point of view, that we need them to recognize the cooperatives to have a seat in the planning commissions, because you are speaking about cooperatives, but you are not with them. And you cannot speak for us when we are not there. We need to speak for ourselves, so that we know our situation. Lastly, Madam, as you come in to take the platform, it's about the dignity of the people, that we don't have to need to close the gap. And I must say that you said the question that people were not organized. People are organized in terms of their sectors. Sangoko was organizing non-governmental organizations. Sanako is organizing cooperatives, But we will see these other, like Nasas that we're speaking about, they're not registered as cooperatives. They might be operating as they are, which they are allowed. But in terms of the businesses, they might be different about who NAFCOC or who Business Council and so on. They're organized at that particular level. But the point that we can take is about the solidarity, that we can say together, we can come together. And I give challenge to you. I put this to you. Mobilize us, call us, give us a call, bring us together, and we chart the way forward. We play a role. We've got an opportunity to do that. And thanks to the university. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ehard.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ludwig Ehard. I am from Germany. I have worked 30 years in the cooperative sector in Germany and abroad. And now I'm here in South Africa 1.5 years, and I ask myself very often, what is the problem here in South Africa? And very often I compare our both systems. Our cooperative sector in Germany, it's going quite well. And thanks to our cooperative sector, we have a strong middle class, and I can share, and we are here to share our experience with you. And I like to motivate you. Cooperatives are working. I am a little bit concerned in South Africa. The word cooperatives at the moment has more a negative touch because of the failure. But if you go to Europe, a lot of, you also mentioned Italy, is also good cooperative sector, also like in Germany and in a lot of different European countries too. When it comes to cooperative, we are talking about cooperation. Look to Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, we German. We cooperate already. They finance a part of this event, and I am the expert, the cooperative expert. So we cooperate already. So, and also I like the cooperation. The sector needs also the connection between the university, between the academic circle. It's very important to have that. We have it in Germany too, and what we have, an integrated cooperative sector. This is still missing. You are working on it. I'm a little bit also disappointed because you had a good cooperative sector in the history, but of the problems. Now you're starting from the scratch. Why? I'm a German. I don't know about the history, but I ask myself why. So you can learn from each other. This is, and you haven't to reinvent the wheel again. This is my message. And when it comes to the cooperative, very often the problem, the old problem lies in the details. The implementation lies the devil lies in the details. And this is what happens. You have a lot of ministries are engaged in supporting cooperatives. But then the implementation, this is lacking. And a cooperative is a business. So you count it to the social economy, but it's a business. And we, as in Germany, our cooperatives are businesses. So, and they have to be good in the market. And they have to be professionals. And now, this is the other point. You need to have professionals, but in the cooperatives you don't have it, and this is this lack of education. This is somehow also the people are unemployed and they have hardly they have knowledge about their business, but this is not the task, not the priority task of a cooperative. This is a task of the government. And the problem while the cooperatives here in South Africa are failing because you are mixed up the education, the low education problem, the lack of education with the cooperatives. No, you have to a little bit separate it. Sure, a cooperative can help to come over this problem, but it cannot solve and it cannot address all the problems of a country. This you have to a little bit divide. In Germany, okay, we are good off now. My colleague from the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung said now you're sending a delegation to Germany to know how we are doing it. Yeah, we have a good this dual education system. This is a good cooperation between the labor sector, the government, and the businesses. Yes, they work together to cooperate. And I'm sure you have a lot of possibilities, but you don't take it here in South Africa. A lot of businesses, they are prepared to work and to assist, especially the whole amount of jobless people. So, but the time is limited. What else I want to tell you, to let you know, very often the reason why our cooperatives are established is wrong. You don't consider a very important principle of the cooperative, self-help and self-determination. The people have to determine themselves what to do. At the moment, they are establishing cooperative because they get a grant, and you said a lot of women groups are here. They form these cooperatives. They are expecting a grant. This doesn't help the movement, and it gives more the movement a negative touch. And so I can also say, what I can also say, it's we have for example, you also say something, a database is missing, a database, and at the moment the cooperative sector doesn't have a face. You don't know how many do the active, so are they passive, and you don't know. So our federation, for example, DGRV is the umbrella organization of all the cooperatives in Germany. They are a database, and we can show our government what the sector all about. Yeah, and what is turnover. And we have sometimes, we have in intervention sector in Germany, our cooperative sector has 20% of the financial market. Our agriculture sector has sometimes 20, but 30% of the market of the agriculture. So then you know what's going on with our cooperatives. But here, if you ask figures, hardly you get it. So, and then what we are doing, the DGRV, we are looking of the nature of the cooperative. Do the cooperatives comply with the principle, with the law, with the constitution? This is what we're doing. And we don't interfere so much in the operational activities, because we can't address all the branches, the financial, the agriculture, the consumer circles. We can't do it. But we look after the nature, and what we are doing it, we create transparency through our control, through our audit. This is what we are doing. And the cooperatives, they know their businesses. Yeah. So I think that's my message for now, and I'm here to share my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ludwig. We will now ask Flavio to say the last word. We won't have a question and answer time, but I think you can all grab us during a tea time and just ask your questions there. Flavio.
Thanks, Susan, and thank you for the invitation, and to all the organizing team as well. Good morning, everybody. To start with, for those of you who are not familiar with Ashoka, Ashoka is the first and the largest global association of leading social entrepreneurs. We started in the late 70s, in a moment where all of these beautiful terms and concepts didn't exist. And today we have about 3,000 social entrepreneurs in 70 countries and offices in 63 countries worldwide. And I'm introducing this just to say that this is a perspective that I was asked to talk about, so to give somewhat of a global or an international perspective to these discussions. So, well, initially when we think of the state of the social economy, we would think of three basic things that automatically come to our mind, and this is some of the things that were presented so far. The first one is the idea of the definitions, of seeing how legitimate we are within our own groups or our own field. So in other words, discussions about, are we speaking the same language? Do we all understand what these terms mean in the same ways? Do we respect what other members of these groups are doing, even though they might not be completely aligned with what we do? So there's that discussion of actually building the field. And today we can say that the field is built in several countries in the world, but there's still innovations happening all the time. It's the very nature of the field. And so it's always kind of that effort of saying, what is the state of the social economy in terms of how aligned are we as diverse members of these groups? The second one is what refers to policy a lot of the times, which is how legitimate are we to the outside, to everybody outside the field. So in other words, do governments understand us? Do they create policies that are able to host our ideas, our structures, and so on? Does society out there, mass people, understand what we do? Do they recognize what we do? Are they part of this with us? Or are they completely aparted from that? And then finally, the third one are the support systems that exist, that we create, and the ones that exist already for us to be able to thrive. And so then we would also ask the question, how developed or not developed is the state of the social economy in a given country based on the support systems that exist or that don't exist? But what I wanted to say is that although this is all very natural, it comes to our minds very automatically, I think it's just a material problem. It's actually, I think it's easier to deal with these problems than it is to deal with the more, let's say, symbolic or systemic problem behind the state of organized civil society, as we can call it. And I think that symbolic problem is the issue of where do we want to go? So what is the vision, the very broad vision that exists of systemic change that is being built by these groups and by all of us here for our countries, for our regions, and for the world? So what we think is really lacking when we look at all these different experiences from the world is the level of depth and of acceptance of this vision by society at large. So in other words, when you look at the national planning, the national development plans, how participatory was the process of coming up with these plans? How are citizens engaged in the process? And then when we ask about implementation, why doesn't implementation work? A lot of the times it's also because what would be the direct beneficiaries are maybe not even aware of these plans, and because they haven't been consulted, they haven't built it themselves. So what I wanted to talk briefly about in two different, maybe three different cases where this more symbolic kind of the big vision, the desired future, positive future that a country wants for itself and for its people comes into place. So if we look at, for example, the experience in France, where the legislation for the free association of individuals started very, very early in 1901, you will see that there's a profusion of these associations, but that actually what brings the most added social value to the French people is actually the government, because it's how the French people themselves decided that it would be under the framework of welfare state and a strong centralized state that doesn't oppress people, but that accepts these social innovations and puts them into practice. So a lot of the richness of these experiences in France is due to the fact that the government actually embraced them. And then the experience in Brazil, for example, where we have 500,000 citizen sector organizations, as Ashoka calls them, so non-profits. We have 4 times larger population than South Africa, but we have 10 times more citizen sector organizations. And the reason why we have that is because the way that historically the sector developed itself in Brazil was coming from very based community level organizations that started getting together without properly the institutional side. And what happens now after, let's say, our Lula moment, as South Africans like to call it, is that actually that moment was created and not, it didn't come into being, it was created. And so what I wanted to say is that the reason why the citizen sector in a country like Brazil is striving more nowadays is not because Lula just came with these magical solutions, but because many of these solutions actually were originated by the citizen sector. Many of the citizen sector organizations early on, even during the military dictatorship, are the ones that came up with the solutions that then were incorporated. Many of the social projects, the social programs of the government derive directly from that. So I think that this sector is also the sector that has the knowledge and comes up with these solutions that become more widespread. So just to conclude, what I wanted to say is that for that vision to be developed and for all of the hard work that we do to be aligned with a vision of what is this positive future that we want to see, it is crucial under the Ashoka understanding that we measure the state of the social economy or solidarity economy in a given country, not just by how have we resolved the material problems that I alluded to in the beginning, but how are we enabling every person in this given country or region to become change makers? And what we mean by becoming change makers, not that everybody has to set up their CSOs or their social enterprises, but that everybody has first the freedom, then the confidence, and then the support to be to act as change makers, which means to take the responsibility into their own hands to solve the problems that they see in their communities. Things that, for example, the minister was saying early this morning are things that only happen if people take the responsibility of doing it themselves. So this is just a challenge that I would place for the colloquium and as we move forward of trying to ask ourselves, are we in South Africa, as we do all this hard work of solving some of these material problems, are we also enabling every South African everywhere in the country to actively grow up as change makers and have an active, practical experience of promoting change with their own hands? Thank you.